right, it's 9 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order. Mr. Enter, is there any corrections or additions?
One correction, Mr. Chair. Item number 20, the RBA is withdrawn and will be considered at a future date. And we do have two additions, 24A and 24B are all correctional officer appointments.
Is there any reports from the commissioners?
Mr. Chair, I had a Highway 14-15 Gateway Construction Update meeting February 8th. A Sioux Trails Ad Hoc Committee meeting February 9th. Minnesota Housing Partnership February 13th and 14th. And a SHIP meeting February 15th.
Have an salary advisory committee.
At a Highway 14-15, I'll maybe just chime in with Commissioner Borger here. And then the Drainage Waters Conference on February 15th up in St. Cloud.
Okay, and I've got the salary survey committee, the drainage committee with Commissioner Winchell, or drainage meeting with Commissioner Winchell, and the Sioux Trails committee. Commissioner Pollard, do you have anything?
Nope, nothing from me.
Okay, that'll be our agenda for today. Got the minutes of February 6th. Chance to look at
Move. Second.
them. Yeah, motion is second. Any discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, Sheriff.
Chair, just a monthly report. Good morning. How you doing?
Good.
Road better this morning coming down?
Oh, it's a little slick. They were slick. Be careful. Go ahead. Number 2.
About the report, I don't know if you have any questions or concerns or.
I'll make a motion to accept an order file.
Second?
Okay, motion is second. Any other discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank
All right,
you. And have a
thank you.
good day, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gene,
Hey, Terry.
Good
Good morning.
morning.
I bring to you the claims this morning. We have a total of $659,233.59 to be approved.
Well, I'd gone through them and I didn't see anything. Move to approve it.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion is second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Number 4.
David Schumacher dropped off an application for an off-site gambling for Leavenworth Baseball. The event will be held February 24th through 5th at the Leavenworth Recreation Hall.
Are you around this Friday too?
And if
Are you
approved,
around
we'll
this
be
Friday too?
forwarding that into the state so that they can have their event.
I'll move it.
Second it.
Okay, motion is second. Any other discussion? Mr. Entry, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Berg?
Yes.
Commissioner Potter?
Yeah.
Commissioner Winchell?
Yes.
Commissioner Borger?
Yes.
Commissioner Simpson?
Yes. Motion passes. Okay, number 5.
My next item is acceptance of the voting equipment grant award that was made by the state. The state had over $13 million in requests for equipment from all 85 counties and 17 cities. Needless to say, with only a $7 million distribution or appropriation from the legislature, it didn't give everybody the monies that may have been needed in their jurisdiction. Our grant, as they have given us, is a $45,000 award for tabulators, vote counters, or auto marks. And the $14,456.45 was for the e-poll books. So a total award that will be made to Brown County is in the amount of $59,000. Requires the county to match some of those, the minimum match listed there is about $50,000 as well. And this is just the grant award. Basically what will happen is I'll submit that, they'll send the money, and at the next board meeting, I have planned to share with the commissioners the equipment that we are hoping to purchase for the election in 2018. And that will be for consideration at that point. So this is just the acceptance of the grant.
So is the, you make a note there that says the grant requires 50% match for election equipment and 75% match for electronic rosters. Do you mean 25% there? I'm just looking at your numbers. The electronic rosters are 14,000, we're gonna match 4,800.
That's the minimum. I'm not saying that's what we're gonna match, that's the minimum.
That's the minimum.
It's the minimum we have to match.
And we have to match 75%, but still, that is correct, it's 75% or whatever they cost. Or is it 25%?
Oh, it's 25%. The grant requires 50% and a 25% match for electronic, my apologies.
Okay, that's right.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure I knew.
It depends on where you read it, you know, it says 75% and I wrote it incorrectly, yes. They're a pretty good match combination, and for the use of them, very beneficial.
I'll move the acceptance of the grant, I guess, with the agreement, huh? Sign the voting grant agreement.
I'll second it. Okay, we have a motion, a second. Any other discussion?
Yes, I did.
How are you on other supplies?
If not, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Number 6.
CD 28. CD 28, findings of fact, will be prepared by the county attorney on the David and Ruth Anglin and Celia Schwashka outlet into CD 28. We will be billing them $2,600 and for the outlet fee, and they will be required to pay all of the costs incurred with the proceedings that we've had thus far. I don't know the numbers of that at this point. We'll wait until things wash out a little bit longer, make sure we've got everything. And the benefits will be adjusted, and the landowners will be responsible for that percentage of benefits in CD 28. Once approved, this will be recorded and we'll get the billings prepared eventually.
The viewers have done their work on this, Jean?
Yeah, that was the one that we did last meeting. And this is the one that they did assign benefits to, the next petition, no benefits yet.
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion, a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Inter, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Potter,
Yes.
Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Commissioner Winchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Borkert,
Yes.
Commissioner Simonson.
Yes, motion passes. Number 7.
And that is the petition of Joseph and Cindy Steckel, Joseph and Judy Schwartz, and others, David Schwartz Trust, to outlet into CD 48. These are the findings of fact. We had the discussion at the last board meeting. The petitioners in this case are responsible for a $25 per acre outlet fee, which will be billed to them, and that total will be $6,480. Until the outlet has been completed, there will be no benefits assigned. They're going to be responsible for the benefits that they have into their current ditch systems, and when all is said and done, the viewers will relook at this particular outlet and determine where the benefits will lie for each of the property owners in those systems. A reduction to landowners, I think, in one system, and an increase in another.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, motion is second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Enter, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Bird?
Yes.
Commissioner Potter?
Yes.
Commissioner Winchell?
Yes.
Commissioner Borgert?
Yes.
Commissioner Simmons?
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you, Gene.
Good morning. There's one, a relay and tie of a ditch crossing, there's some holes in it. They completed the repair in December. And it's just going to approve this one.
That's a larger culvert.
And I think it was like a 60-inch or something like that.
Is that plastic?
Concrete.
When they were originally, most of these when they were originally installed, they just, the culverts were made so they kind of fitted one into the other, a little bit of a lip that felt. They didn't tie them together, and over time, because it's in an area that can freeze in parts of it, they just slide apart, and then that gap gets, the water goes down. We have one done on our ditch we're on, so this is the best answer. It's tying them together, they stay. They drill a hole through there, and they put a threaded rod with pins down so they'll stay there.
It'll be good for many, many
I don't think you'll have to worry about them again. They'll last longer than that. And they reuse the same culverts, right?
years. That's in good shape, the concrete's in good shape, so.
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion is second on the repair. Any other discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Number 9.
Number 9, we opened bids for Super Oil, and we received 3 bids. You see them there, they're quite a bit higher than last year, but the low bid is 21% higher. Yes, the price of oil has gone up some. This is to do about 30 miles of highway.
I know it's higher than it was last year, but it's still lower than it was for the previous 8 years before that, so we're still not, it went tremendously up again. Not much we can do about it. We have to work with the best bid we can get.
Yeah, by sealing, we save a lot of years on our roads, so.
Move that, accept that little bid.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. Any other discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Number 10.
Number 10 is the ADA transition plan. We talked at the board last fall sometime about we need to do an ADA transition plan. The federal government is looking at withholding federal highway funds if we don't have an up-to-date plan. And this mostly involves the head ramps at the intersections where it has sidewalk. So, a number of counties in our district were planning to get together and work with Stonebrook Engineering. But the main engineer from Cottonwood County that was running it, she left and went to another county, so it kinda got stalled. No one else was ready to pick it up, so I'd like to move ahead with just Brown County. I got a proposal from Stonebrook Engineering for you to consider.
This is just for the, it's not for actually doing the work, this is just for,
Create the plan. They're gonna go out in the field, do measurements and assess what we have. Like I said in the RBA, we put curb ramps in most of our intersections, but they're not up to current standards. It used to be you could just cut a curb in and put that exposed aggregate or just regular concrete. Now it needs to be a truncated dome. They used to have certain standards for the slope from where you cut the curb up to where the sidewalk is. They flatten that slope quite a bit. In some instances, you have to have intermediate landing, depending on how much it goes up. There's just a lot more variables. You've probably seen them on the state highways. They really do a lot of work on theirs. Ours are functional, but they're not up to code, and so Stonebrook would help us create the plan, decide which ones need to be done sooner than later, and we'd have it.
Do we have an inventory of roughly, so this would create that
This
also?
would create that.
And then what's the timeline of when this work has to be completed? Is there a timeline, or is it?
Right now, there's no timeline. These laws were passed in '73 and 1990. And the idea was that as you did another project on them, you bring them all up to, I think that's still the idea, but things keep changing on us, and what we think is up to date isn't anymore. We do have some intersections that haven't been worked on for a long, long time, and they don't have curb cuts in them.
Is there a reason we only go with one quote?
This is the one that our district engineers were talking about going with. They have a good reputation. In consulting engineering, you don't always get competing quotes. You know their quality of work and how much they know about the situation. This is one place where the state law doesn't require two quotes. Go with one.
And Mr. Chairman, related to that somewhat, we've also talked with Wayne and Ruth Schaefer and HR with respect to the county buildings. And we do have a proposal from Stonebrook to do a study of all county buildings and county parks for ADA, because as Wayne noted, that hasn't been looked at formally in a long time. However, for the county buildings, we are going to look to see if we can get an engineering firm to give us a second quote. That's not as critical, I think, with the service regarded the highway department, but we are going to spend a little more time on that one.
Yeah, with the highway funds, we're an easier target to withhold federal funds, and we've got 3 significant projects coming up here very quick.
Mr. Chair. Yes.
I mean, we certainly want to be in compliance, and we've got that part as far as the financing, so I think it's absolutely necessary. I'll make a motion to approve.
And I'll second it.
question. After you get the report, you will go over that and look at what the recommendation is. Will we get part of that report as well?
Sure. They propose putting together a management team, which would be involved, whoever the board decides to be involved in. So we'll have a meeting beforehand, and we'll tell them what we expect. And then they'll set up, we have to have public input, so they'll help set that meeting up. I told them that we could handle that, so that it wouldn't cost as much for them to come down for that. But involved in that. The board will be involved in that public meeting, so you'll have that whole information there of what they found, what they're recommending. And then once you get that public input, then they'll put the final one together.
And most of these situations where we're going to have the change or improve or do something with will be within cities, because we don't have, we're not talking about any rural applications.
It's all within the cities.
Okay.
So cities have gone through this already with, on their own streets, I'm assuming?
They're supposed to be doing it too.
They're in the process too.
I haven't asked them where they're at. But like on the smaller cities like Sleepy Eye, Springfield, and Norwood, the county road, we take care of the whole road. But in the big town of New Ulm, they're over 5,000, so they have their own funding. So when you have a county road in New Ulm, we gotta work together with them.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is Chris here? Move on to
The librarian is in alcohol.
Oh, she already?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Go ahead.
Chris Hardy, Public Library for you today, following up on our discussion 2 weeks ago to ask for formal support of the resolution before you regarding supporting Minnesota Library Association and Information and Technology Educators in Minnesota 2018 legislative platform.
Mr. Chairman, since the last meeting, Chris did talk with Martin County, and this is a resolution similar to what the Martin County Commissioners approved. And if the board favors this, then we'll send that to Representative Torkelson and also Senator Daines.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I appreciate the follow-up on that, Chris, and I fully support it. I'll make a motion to approve.
Second it.
Motion is second. Any other discussion? It's important and a very worthy cause and something that develops the community and a source of good information. So. Any other discussion? Mr. Enter, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Borgert?
Yes.
Commissioner Potter?
Yes.
Commissioner Bird?
Yes.
Commissioner Winchell?
Yes.
Commissioner Simpson?
Yes, motion passes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Rich. Should we go on to some committee reports?
Mr. Chair, I'll start with the Highway 1415 Gateway construction update. It was on February 8th, 5 to 7 at the community center. And I thought it was very well done. I really appreciated how accommodating they are as far as answering questions for us, for the community. Just maybe some highlights. You can see that they're already staging equipment, so everything's gonna be, I think as soon as they can roll with it, they're gonna be starting. And for 90 days, it's gonna be closed from Broadway to Front Street. And when that starts is basically when they can start moving in and working on that particular part of the project. But once we can open that up, the bridge is gonna be closed for a couple of years. But, you know, if we can open it up to Front Street, that's gonna alleviate a lot of issues for traffic issues as far as local traffic issues for New Ulm. So that's important, but again, it'll be 90 days. The River Bridge, again, probably this April, is gonna be closed until fall of 2019. And then the official detour is open spring of 2019. And then, you know, at the fall of, again, you're looking at quite a while, but fall of 2019 will be for the remaining construction. Realistically, I think I've reported on the other information, and I know it's been in the journal. Do you have any questions with that? I know Commissioner Winchell, you maybe have something to add in there as well.
Yeah, I guess the only point I would add additionally is that there was discussion, I had discussion with the engineers at Bolton Mink about the item you had brought to our attention that someone had suggested possibly stopping the 4-lane at County Road 37 on the south end of New Ulm and just connecting there. And I said that was not acceptable to us, and that we spent $35 million on an interchange that's set up to handle 4-lane, and that this road needs to continue with 4-lane all the way to the intersection of 1415. He did ask that I put that in writing to the meeting in Cortland here that's coming up. I believe it's the 22nd. That those issues would be discussed. He gave me a website, mnhighway14.com, and there you can leave comments and concerns, and it's a pretty nice little website. And they've got a lot of comments and concerns through Cortland, and people giving suggestions on how they're going to intersect and how things are going to work there. And there was a comment that they should stop the highway at County 37. So I attached a note to that and said that I didn't think that was a good move because of the exchange being built to handle the 4-lane and spending that expenditure there. But more importantly, if we funnel all the traffic through the south end in Ulm and they have to come up Broadway, the amount of wear and tear on Broadway, the slowdown of the traffic, the uneven load balance of traffic all coming in one spot there instead of being diverse and coming into the two. Most of the trucking firms are located in the northern end of town. We don't need them coming through the town. Numerous items such as that I entered into that. Hopefully they see those comments. We'll try to make that February 22nd meeting in Cortland 4:30 to 6:30, but that's the only additional comment I have.
And that the interchange it's, you know, I took a photo of it, that was, and I can certainly pass this around, but that's going to be, so basically if you're coming on 15, if you're heading south, you're coming down halfway down the hill, you're going to have, you know, and there's going to be good signage, we talked about that, but realistically, if you miss your turnoff to go to Mankato, you're going to have to go all the way to the roundabout on the other side of the bridge by Front Street to basically be able to correct it and come back. So it'll be different, you know, and you're talking about like 20 feet. So it'll be going over, it'll be like an overpass, and then below that, you're going to have, you know, the roundabout. So it'll certainly look very different. I think it's going to be a nice addition to the city. I think the bridges are long overdue as far as bringing them up to code. So that would conclude my report unless there's questions. Thank you. Want me to move on to the next one? I had the Sioux Trails Ad Hoc Committee on February 9th, and we have we're going to be looking at changing the way we've been handling as far as funding, or at least we're considering that in discussion. And when I say we, we're talking about with Mr. Henderson and other individuals that are part of that that committee, which is also Chairman Simonson. And we've had former discussions with that, even with Sioux Trails. When I say with Sioux Trails, I'm talking about the executive director and Catherine Job and her staff. You know, realistically, we're trying to find probably the best opportunity. I think options are important, and we're looking for the best options that would serve our citizens. So we're looking at something different, and we're convinced of that. It's probably gonna be more of an a la carte type of funding mechanism, whatever we need. If they're providing it, we're gonna pay directly for that versus just overall lump sum, which is kind of what we've had in place currently. That the current formula is based on population and then just overall Brown County usage. That really would conclude it. I guess I would defer that in the interest of time to Chairman Simonson.
Well, the only other thing would be that I think this proposal, we would have the end of March, I believe, is the time frame. March and April, we would have it together to hopefully move forward with it, so you guys would be made aware of what that is at the time, so that we have that together for budgeting and get that together for, you know, for sure by June that we're ready for it, so. I guess that would be.
That would conclude my report unless there's questions.
Okay, I think we'll move on to Rich. Let's see. We got number 12.
Morning.
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 Bringing the yearly equipment and software purchases to the board for 2018 was something I do every year. These are equipment that has been gone over the budget during the budget process last year. They're basically replacing computers that are 6, 7, 8 years old. Purchasing monitors. A lot of people are going to the 2 and 3 monitors on their workstations. 3 of the computers are purchased through the Land Records Fund, and prices are off the state contract for Dell and CBW. We'll be ordering equipment over the next few months, so I'm just looking for approval at this time for the new listed equipment. Second page has all the departments that are purchasing the equipment, and they have those prices in their budget, should have prices.
What happens to the old monitors and other equipment?
A lot of that goes into our training lab, but we also hang on to it because it seems like every year there's a need, a new office opens up, or there's an intern or something that people are hiring, so we use those in those cases.
Are we replacing about the same number of computers per year?
Yeah, it's about the same number, yeah. We cycle through 6 to 7 years, and so it's 6 or 7 times that before we get everything replaced.
This is all stuff we went over when we were working on budget, and nice to see that we, I would say, we're significantly under the cost of what we estimated it to be, so that's a positive. It's much better to be under than over. So I think we've covered it all once, and I didn't see anything else. Maybe question anything? Motion to approve.
Second. Go ahead.
Second by Bert. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Enter, will you call the roll?
Commissioner Potter,
Yes.
Commissioner Bird,
Yes.
Commissioner Winchell,
Yes.
Commissioner Borgert,
Yes.
Commissioner Simmons.
Yes, motion passes. Number 13.
We're looking at purchasing some fax software to replace the physical faxes that we have in the county. We have 15 of those spread amongst all the buildings. In the original voice phone system proposal, we were keeping the fax machines, but we were buying devices to accommodate those. Those were called AdTrans. They each handled 4 ports. We would have to buy one for each building, at least 2 for the courthouse. Those were at $640 a piece for $4,500 total. Because we're trying to, that would include us having to cable each fax machine to that device. And in some buildings like the CSB, that means running cable from the 3rd floor down to the network room. And it was just becoming a hassle, more labor and time than what was worth. So I looked at getting a fax software which would eliminate the physical machines. We would use the software to do the faxing using the same phone numbers to do the faxing incoming and outgoing. So that would, the cost on the one that we're looking at, the fax core, is $4,880. There's payback on that after a year and a half if we were to go with just the phone, keeping the phone lines, the Centrix phone lines. So in the end result is we're not maintaining equipment, we're not buying toner, we're not using paper. It's software driven, and that should eliminate some of our hassles of keeping those going in the different buildings.
So every computer would have access
Correct.
to a fax?
Those that need access would have access. We're looking at charging back the maintenance costs to the users of the software, because the CSB is the majority user of the fax machine. We would recoup some of those costs through revenue from the grants and stuff that they get from state and federal government.
So each person has, that needs the fax, whatever, we're still gonna need machines to scan into the.
We have lots of scanners already.
Right, but I mean, I'm just trying to see in my head how this is gonna work. So
Sure.
we still need scanner to scan in, then it's gonna be sent over the phone lines digitally to wherever it's faxed to.
Right.
And then if we wanted to print it off, it would just run through the printer, the computer printer
Correct.
in general.
Yep.
So we're eliminating that fax machine basically,
Exactly.
completely.
Yep.
And so we might have a little more wear and tear on a printer versus what it had before, but
You might, if you need that hard copy, like now the income maintenance, and actually social services and child support are looking at, or income maintenance already has Caseworks, which everything is digital already. They don't
put it
hand
in a
paper.
file digitally and it's done.
Right, and I talked to Teresa Schrader down there last week, and she said that they had saved 31 cases of paper because they moved. So that's a.
And it's storage of 31 cases of paper.
Right, exactly. So.
This cost, is that based on our size? Does that have something to do with
Yeah,
it?
it does. It's, we're getting 2 channels. They figure that we can handle all of the machines under 2 channels. You can buy any number of channels you want, but they want to have 2 for incoming, 1 for incoming, 1 for outgoing. And so, that's a basic, they said that's sort of the basic need for somebody our size.
Do all our printers have scanning capability?
No, not all of them, but
The
we have
main-
single scanners, separate scanners on a lot of the workstations right now. If you get it in an email, you can easily fax it from your email.
Right.
And then all that stuff is highly portable then.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're PDFs, there'll be PDFs once you do the scan.
I think it sounds like a really good move, and we'll move it.
It's a motion.
Yep.
I'll second.
Motion second, and the existing faxes again, you would do what?
Well, we look to see if anybody would want to purchase them, but
Yep.
a lot of them are in the older stages, so.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Interley, call the roll.
Commissioner Winchell?
Yes.
Commissioner Bird?
Yes.
Commissioner Potter?
Yes.
Commissioner Borker?
Yes.
Commissioner Simonson?
Yes. Motion passes. Okay, 14.
The new video and door security system we need to have a video camera in the courthouse elevator. That is a requirement by the sheriff's office. And so, in order to do that, we have the cost for installing, the cost for the camera itself were in the grant, but we didn't realize that it didn't have the necessary traveling cable in the elevator. And so that needs to be installed so that we can get video in the door, or in the elevator. MEI is our elevator vendor, and so the cost that we got from them was $2,266 to install that cable. So we're looking at getting that approved so that we can put the camera in there.
That's the elevator
Over here.
over here. The other one already has it?
That is something I'm checking, they haven't gotten back to me yet. I'm assuming it does because it's a newer one, but we'll see. And that project needs to be re-looked at anyway, so, the LEC security.
And the reason for putting the camera in there is part of the grant required to do that with that safety grant?
Right, the safety grant.
Move it.
Second.
Motion a second.
This will have to come out of contingency, is that right?
We will have to do match for the state grant. Some of that is coming out of contingency, and this would then too, as part of the project. Unless Rich has additional funds in his budget someplace. No, either way, it would be levy funds.
Okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right,
All right, thank you.
thank you, Rich. Okay, John, number 15.
Good morning.
Morning.
All right, item number 15 is to consider the approval of the Wanton Lawn Watershed Planning Project Memorandum Agreement, and also to designate the water planners in place, representative to the primary contact concerning this memorandum agreement. For a little background, as you know, we're part of this One Watershed, One Plan process with the Wanton Run River Watershed, which includes the southern portion of Brown County. As we've been moving forward, the steering committee, which consists of mostly county staff from all the counties involved, soil and water conservation staff, have been putting together meetings and information that are required of this grant process. And then in turn, what we're doing is also now working with the policy committee, which consists of commissioners and soil and water conservation district board members. And then making sure that all the information the steering committee has, the policy committee would also have to be aware of. Because those policy committee members through this process are ultimately the decision makers as we move forward. And we did have our first kind of informal policy committee meeting on January 31st. Commissioner Simonson was there. And I thought that meeting went pretty well, and the idea is that we're keeping everybody informed and up to speed before moving on and not leaving anybody in the dark. So I thought that meeting went pretty well. It was informative. But as part of the grant process goes, we need a memorandum of agreement, which is going to be signed by all counties and soil and water conservation districts. That basically says that we will all be working together through this project and this planning process. So the counties involved are Blue Earth, us, Cottonwood, Jackson, Martin, and Wanwan County. In addition to this memorandum of agreement, we need to also designate, I'm asking to designate myself as the authorized representative for any concerns or issues regarding this memorandum of agreement, which will then be forwarded on to the policy committee members as well.
John, there is, as far as each county is expected to commit in-kind hours, is that correct?
Exactly.
And so this is a little more work on your part. I mean, you've already put together our water plan, so this is maybe some additional time that you wouldn't have spent otherwise, but in the end, I think it'll be good. I don't expect it to take a huge amount of your time, correct?
No, I mean, and so you're exactly correct, and the money that we get from the state through the Natural Resources Block Grant is for water planning. So kind of in-kind money would be my time spent doing water planning activities.
That was gonna be my question. Expense to the county will be your in-kind time and per diems for any elected officials coming from the county. That was my understanding. And this is what, expected to be about a 2-year process?
Correct.
And at the end of that 2-year process, then that watershed will be funded through a grant for the watershed and not coming to Brown County, but to that watershed. And this plan will designate how that works.
Yeah, well, it's not guaranteed money, but what it does is it opens up that watershed to monies from the state for people or places that are doing watershed planning. So if there is found that there's resource needs that needs to be addressed in that watershed, by having this plan, just like by having our county water plan, funds, when they become available, we're eligible to take advantage of, which we otherwise might not normally be able to do if we didn't have a watershed plan.
I don't to get in on some of the Lacoparo stuff because it's Area 2 works through that. And so they're at the part now where they're starting to get the funds for that. So, and that's even, I've heard conversation about it's a little bit of a challenge to get into that mode to start using dollars to work in a new process. And so it's not always working smoothly. It takes some time to make the transition to go through planning, and the planning took a little longer than what they planned there, from my understanding, and now everything seems to, it's always new. You're trying to build new, and once it gets going, it'll work very well, I think, but it's just a process.
Yeah.
So is this a 5-year plan? The consultant you hired, is it a 5-year plan or longer?
Ideally, this would be a 10-year.
10-year? Okay, so my question at that meeting we went to is after that 10-year plan, if the work that the consultant recommends isn't all done, can we don't have to spend a huge amount of money to do another 10-year plan, do we? Or can we kind of continue that?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, so the idea wouldn't be that after that 10-year cycle is up that we have to go out and hire a consultant to do this whole process over again. The idea would be that staff is now familiar with working with that document in this process, and will be able to move forward accordingly.
Because a consultant takes a lot of dollars, hopefully we don't have to do that again, so that we can use that for getting things on the ground versus coming up with plans and more paperwork.
Have you selected a consultant already?
No.
Okay, do we have a motion on that?
I'll move to approve it.
I'll second.
Motion second, any other discussion? All right, seeing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thanks, John.
Great, thank you, John. We'll take a 5-minute break.
I think it's better to be on the drone edge than it is to leave a wedge-shaped piece in there that doesn't match either, so I'll move to approve it.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay,
Morning, Commissioners.
good morning.
Today is our annual statistical report, and we thought we'd go a little bit more visual this year, and instead of doing page by page by page. So Yvonne and I are going to kind of walk you through this, and we're just going to kind of keep plugging along on this, and if you have questions, just raise your hand or shout out to us as we go through this. This takes quite a bit of time to go through this, so I want to make sure that I thank Yvonne for helping in this process, as well as our office staff that helped compile and run the numbers for you this morning. So hopefully our technology will work well and we'll be able to work well. First part of this report is a lot of just generic information, So I'm just gonna kind of whiz through some of this. This is our, just our normal data information for you. The population of the county and mission statement of our department. Kind of breaks it down to our statute, our authority for the department that we run. Remember, that we have 3 probation delivery systems in Minnesota. This talks a little bit about some of that. This is our organizational structure for the department for 2017 for last year. We kind of go into a little bit of, so you have some information on the responsibilities and requirements that the probation officers have, different duties and requirements, the statute references for requirements that we are authorized to do. Some of the training requirements. We make it very critical that our probation officers get out into the field and be involved in communities. We have an advisory council that is supposed to meet twice a year. We've had some changing with the Department of Corrections, which are supposed to co-facilitate our meetings, so sometimes it doesn't always happen. Right now that person's on the long-term medical leave, so we're trying to determine if we should have another meeting or wait until that person comes back, and so we're working on that issue right now.
I'm glad you brought that up because I saw my name on there and I've never been to a meeting, so
Well, I think
it would have been a long time ago if I
yeah,
had.
we usually do twice a year. Last year we only did the one.
So maybe I'm not getting notified or I don't know, but
The last one was in last February, last year.
maybe I'm not remembering. I don't know.
Some information that about 10 years ago we moved down, the whole state of corrections moved down the evidence-based practices road, and this kind of explains what all that means and how we do that, and how we don't just meet with clients, but there's actually evidence and different risk and needs and assessment tools that we use to help move clients forward in the rehabilitation world, and what we can do, even with some of the hardest core individuals, to get them back on track, or at least attempt to. And how we can measure that in some of our offenders, and how we can measure their risk and need assessments.
Yeah, okay, let's do that.
And now we'll get into the stuff that commissioners like to talk about.
Yeah.
This is the revenue for last year, the different categories. The money that comes into our department each year. So we had $626,000 that came in through the department, through salary reimbursement. The second one is a crime victim grant. We have our caseload reduction money. I'm going to get to my little notes here in case there's some things I want to bring up. And Yvonne, if you have comments, just jump in anywhere here too as well.
This first 4 categories, the one that stuck out the most, that lesson I noticed was the probation supervision fees. That went up last year. We collected about $49,000. This year, about $60,000 came in. That is everything from supervision fees, UA fees, other categories in that one.
We also brought in a little bit more in our SDS projects. We brought in $24,000 this year, and last year it was $19,000. So we just had some better projects. The biggest reduction in revenue this year was in the adult drug court. Last year we still had one of our probation officers on loan to the district court, so they were reimbursing us. So we had $112,000 last year, and this year last year had that one payment in January of the $20,000. So that now will be zeroed out now for this coming year. That's the big change there.
So I'm gonna give you that
Other than
back.
that, this year is going to be, as we go through this project, or our statistics this year, it's going to be kind of boring. There really isn't any major changes, except for out-of-home placements that you're going to see today, which is maybe a good thing. There just is really no major ups, no major downs. Everything is pretty much the same this year. Not hearing anything, I'm going to move down to the expenses.
$1,006,000, and that stayed about the same as our previous year. Detention was probably the third item down. We've been pretty lucky the last couple of years. Our detention fees have been pretty low. This last year went up. We were at 13,000 last year, and we went up to 30,000 this year. So a few more kids going into detention for a few longer stays. I think we were at a couple unusual years. I think 30,000 more likely to be more of a realistic number in my opinion.
So where's that at?
That's the third line down. That's juvenile.
Where would the location be?
Almost all of our kids are held at Prairie Lakes in Wagner. Occasionally, some kids might get picked up in other locations in the state, and then we'll move them to the nearest detention center in that area. Otherwise, I don't know if I really see anything that stands out here from the previous year. So we'll talk a little bit about juvenile numbers. And again, to talk about our statistics, we have the people that were already on probation in 2017, and then all the people that come in on probation in 2017. So what you're looking at is not only cases, but offenders. So an offender can be charged with 5 counts of DWI or five different counts of something, but the case, so they can apply cases, but the dark means the person. So just the body. So one person can have multiple charges. And that, so if you see it again, our numbers, we had 153 last year, we had 153 in 2016, we had 160 last year. About the same. Not a lot of difference. So again, this is cases transferred in from other counties. It's people we already have on probation, and then it's all the people that come in for that calendar year. This is the number that, the next one, the out-of-home placements, that we all probably take the most serious look at, the most expensive part of the county budget. We had a couple of really nice years there in the probation department. And last year we had $347,404 in out-of-home placement costs attributed to our department. Not our worst year, certainly not our best year. The next page is what we can tell you exactly where that money goes. We started tracking that for you a couple of years ago. And you can kind of see the largest difference is in the sex offender world, as you've heard me speak many times in the past. We had the Leo Hoffman Center in 2016, we had 54 days of service. And last year we had 479. There's our dollars right there. It's almost $300 a day at that facility. Most of those placements are nearly 18 months in length. These are usually pretty severe cases. Our adolescents have committed a pretty serious crime. Mille Lacs Academy, right underneath that, is also a sex offender treatment program. Sometimes we might have, the kids might know each other. There's a specific reason we don't want them in the same facility, so then we'll have them up north. Those are our 2 basic sex offender residential programs that we utilize in Minnesota. We did have one kid in Anoka. That's a new facility we have not used. And East Regional Juvenile Center was a kid that was picked up in that area and was placed there for a short period of time until we got him back into this area. Any questions on the out-of-home placements?
The ages, I'm assuming you see younger and younger all the time, or what's that?
No, I don't know if I'd say that this last year. I think the sex offender kids usually are the 14 to 16-year-olds typically. Would you say that? Yeah. I don't know if they're getting younger and younger. I think they're really in that specific age range. You know, we do a psychosexual evaluation, which helps to determine if they need out-of-home placement or not. Not all kids do. Some kids we can manage in the community.
They can only get so young anyway. Anything 10 under is a CHIPS case, that'd be human services place for friends and probations.
And one out-of-home placement sex offender kid for 1 year is $100,000, over $100,000, one kid. So here's our adult statistics, kind of the same world. The darker bar is the number of bodies, and the grayer bar is the number of cases. Again, about the same thing, not a lot of big change, which is a good problem in my estimation.
Why do our cases, our numbers of offenders are pretty level, but our caseload is increasing? So are we charging more charges against?
Sometimes it's prosecution discretion, sometimes it's, I don't know, if we go back like 15 years, it was real high again too. So I don't know, do you have sometimes it's just.
Yeah, clientele too, I think sometimes you get people
I mean, you can
want to
get,
commit different crimes and.
right, you can get like a DWI person charged with 3 counts of DWI, an open bottle, a speeding ticket, and all those count as cases. And then when it comes to the end, then they'll dismiss some of them. But they show up as a case. And that's just how our computer system collects that data. They're charged.
A lot of our adults also have a few files.
Right.
They're already on for DWI and they get a drug charge, or they have a carryover crime, and then they, so we always have a select chunk of adults that are regulars that seem to keep coming back.
So these are charges, not anything that is ultimately.
Yes. This is the offense report that our computer system at the end will take everybody on the calendar year that was on probation, even for 1 day on Brown County probation, and here's who we have. So either they're pre-trial, they're sitting and waiting for it to be dispensed out of the court system, they've been charged, they're on probation. So this lists everybody for everything. So you can kind of see again all the different cases that come through. And let me just see if there was anything that, again, not a lot of major differences. There were just, we had fewer possession of marijuana, but we had more minor consumptions. A lot more controlled substance cases this year. But again, just nothing that's like, wow, this is a major increase in one particular area.
Sometimes that ebbs and flows with the economy too. If
Sometimes.
the economy's better, it seems like sometimes drug cases pick up, and when the economy's worse, the assault and burglary and theft cases go up. So.
Now we'll get to Letty Ron talk for a while, so my voice is.
Give your throat a break. The top one is our adult treatment court. It formerly was known as our drug court program, so it's now called treatment court. In 2017, we had 22 participants in that program, and to date, we've had 50 people graduate from drug court or treatment court. It's going to be hard to remember to change that. Crime Victim Services, this is that program that started in 2011. We started off with a grant for $35,000. Now we receive about $72,000, and that fully supports that program with some in-kind funding from Brown County for our other staff's time and for her office space. So Bernie primarily takes care of that program. She assisted over 600 victims in 2017, 535 primary and about 80 secondary. And then she has to, for her Stanford Office of Justice program, she has to keep track of absolutely everything she does. And so she had about 4,200 services over the year's time in helping victims.
What's the difference between primary and secondary?
Primary would be the actual victim. Secondary might be a spouse or a child other people might be living in that house that was burglarized. She spent a lot of time with the homicide case, and so she had a lot of secondary victims in that also. Our DWI Impact Program is the panel of volunteers that we have for our DWI offenders on our underage drink and drive clients. You want to talk about intensive DWI?
So,
You want to talk about the intensive program? Keep going.
this is the intensive DWI supervision program. Program we started back in 1994. Again, running pretty consistently. Intensive juvenile treatment program. We kind of split those into two programs a couple of years ago. And so we have the intensive DWI, or I'm sorry, intensive juvenile supervision and juvenile specialty court. The specialty court program, they see the judge every month. In the intensive juvenile, they don't see the judge, but the probation officer's out banging on doors. So they're both high risk, high need, very high risk for out-of-home placement. But we don't place them. We put them in these specialized programs to try to prevent that placement and try to get as many services as we can. So it doesn't look like a lot of numbers, but for every kid that we don't have in that program, or every kid that we have in that program, we're preventing an out-of-home placement. Judge gives the probation officer a lot of flexibility as far as using electronic monitoring and putting people into different levels, including house arrest and very strict curfews when they need to be for in this particular program. So the two that we had in here, believe me, were very rough juveniles. Juvenile specialty court, excuse me, again, as I mentioned, they see the judge here's the numbers on here. These kids were in, there's two of them that were in here the entire year. Some of them were in this program for a couple of years. They see the judge every month, they report on their progress. We have a team of professionals that talk about, just like drug court and treatment court now, we talk about them as far as how they're doing. We have a psychologist, we have school people, we have the judge, we have probation officers, social workers. We're all meeting to try and make sure we get all the needs and everything in there we can get into that home, to keep that kid in that home as long as possible, and hopefully staying out of trouble. Here's our pretrial status. I think as some of you might remember, we were getting really concerned, and that number was skyrocketing out of control here for a few years, but it's really just leveled off the last 3 years. Matter of fact, we matched the number. I mean, that doesn't happen very often. So we think we finally hit a level off period here. And these are offenders that are out on bail. Judges got conditions on them not to drink, not to associate with minors, no domestic violence, stay away from so-and-so, and it's our job to make sure they're in compliance. There's a lot of drug testing, a lot of monitoring of these individuals until they complete their sentence, until they appear in court, or the charge is dismissed, or they're found not guilty in court.
There were 135 bail studies done in pretrial, and that's our pretrial agent comes in the morning, and if law enforcement picks up somebody for a gross misdemeanor DWI or felony burglary, she's given just a few hours to get over to meet with the jail, do collateral contacts, check with victims, and get a report back to the court for a hearing. So that agent's quite busy. The remote electronic alcohol monitoring grant, that is a $13,000 grant we receive each year. If we start to get close to that $13,000, I can usually ask for more money. If one county's not using their monies, they'll usually give me extra if we need it. These are for only DWI offenders who need to be on electronic alcohol monitoring. It could be during the pretrial stage, and it could also be after they were sentenced. Just one more tool that we can use to try and increase public safety, that people aren't out drinking and driving. We have one individual who's been on that program for about a year. His case is still pending. He was put on there in March of last year, and he's still on electronic alcohol monitoring while his case is pending in court. He has a jury trial coming, so hopefully to get him off the program soon. The next one is our teen court, also our juvenile diversion. Those numbers haven't changed a whole lot. We have 55 youth throughout the county serving as jurors in teen court. So they're kids taking the message back to their schools, to their communities. Kids will go up to them and they'll encourage kids not to drink, not to get in trouble. They'll they're kind of our mentors back in their community.
Are these kids from just New Ulm, or are they kids
No,
from
they're
across
kids
the
from
county?
all over the county. Like we have,
But they come here to,
yes,
to
if they
court.
have New Ulm offenders going to court, then we'll usually summons our jurors from Springfield, Sleepy Eye, Comfrey area to serve on the jurors for the New Ulm offenders. And then the same thing, we have a Springfield offender, we'll summons our jurors from New Ulm. So the kids don't know each other.
It's kind of neat, it is an after-school program for some kids that want to get involved in the criminal justice system. But it's also a great program proven by research that if you're sentenced by your peers, you're less likely to get in trouble in the future. We're the longest running teen court program in the state. This is our 20th year. We just completed our 20th year. So we plan to do something this summer yet. We haven't quite figured out exactly what we want to do, but we're pretty proud of that fact. And you as commissioners approved the grant and some funding way back 20 years ago to get this program up and running. And we've provided a lot of support to many different areas or different communities who wanted to start drug court, including Trinidad, the country of Trinidad actually wanted to learn about our drug court program from Judge Rodenberg, and so they got all our information, and I believe the country of Trinidad now runs teen court based off of what Brown County does, so that's kind of interesting.
Haven't you had also like former participants that weren't interested in the profession, and I think one of them might even practice law, like a prosecutor?
We have probation officers in the field now that were teen court jurors. In fact, one in Waseca County was a former police officer. Her father was a police officer, Mr. Kalo. She was a teen court juror way back.
And one from, I thought from Springfield, that ended up really interested in it.
Could be.
Ms. Wong was telling me
We've got
about
one
that.
in law school now.
Or maybe in law school
Yeah.
right now, and that's their intention? They're not practicing yet? Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And some of our best jurors are actually kids who went through teen court, and they've really turned their life around. So they were offenders in teen court, maybe a possession of marijuana charge, and they became jurors. They got off probation, and they weren't really involved in anything, so the jurors said, one of the recommendations is once you get off probation, come join us. They became jurors, and they asked some of the best questions of the offenders because they know what to ask. They've been there, and they've stayed out of trouble, and then went on with some things that were related. But
Back on the pretrial supervision, what's the average day length of that?
Average, huh?
Well, the day length that they would
How
be
long is
considered
that?
in that.
that could vary because somebody might be in court. Mr. Hanson has helped set bail at a certain amount, and then they have a lot of conditions. They're high risk. They have a lot of conditions. They don't want to follow those conditions, so they'll post the maximum bail. So then we take them back off. So they might only be on pretrial for a week. They post max bail, and then they're totally out of our supervision. And then we have others that could be on for a whole year.
Average 4 months, maybe? You would guesstimate?
Yeah, I would think, the rules of criminal procedure are set up to keep things moving, but there are defendants that drag it out sometimes, and
On purpose?
defense attorneys that,
But that's not the norm.
no, I would say 4 to 6 months, I would
6
say.
months. Yeah. And vocational?
Administrative supervision, those cases, they used to be supervised by the court administrator's office. The judge would order somebody have no new violations, have no use, real minor conditions, so they weren't put on probation. We didn't want those people kind of slipping through because the court administrators don't have a lot of time to supervise those cases. So we said, let us supervise them. So we actually do record checks on these clients every 3 months. We are making sure there's no contact with victims. So these are those cases not put on supervised probation, but there's conditions that we need to monitor. The victim offender mediation program, that was a half-time position up until mid-2017 when we had moved staff around. The person running the victim offender mediation is now a probation agent, so this program is considered just 10% of her job description. So we are only doing mediations for maybe our high-profile cases.
So what's the difference between this victim offender mediation and the crime victim, where they,
The crime victim services.
yeah,
The victim offender mediator, we've had this program for, gosh, since 2003, I want to say. This is, the mediator would bring, if it's court ordered to do mediation and the victim agrees, it could be a burglary, your house was burglarized, you're feeling very victimized, you don't know why your house was picked, you feel like, you know, this person was stalking you or watching you. We would bring the victim and the offender together in a controlled setting, both interviewed and knowing what to expect way before the mediation, and they would talk about the offense. The offender would say exactly why he or she committed that burglary on that house, and then the victim shares how devastating it was to the victim and their family. So it helps the victim know that, no, you weren't stalking my house, no, you're not coming back, it was just a fluke that you picked my home. The offender is able to apologize and be able to move on from what they did. Small community, they're probably going to see each other again in the community. Crime victim services primarily assist victims from the very next day of when the offense occurred, helping them with maybe they need new locks put on their house, helping with restitution, getting the person prepared for court, working with Mr. Hansen's office on plea agreements and preparing the victim for court. So completely separate roles.
Typically the timing, victim offender mediation is typically after resolution, after the case has been resolved, and the victim advocate or victim coordinator is pretty much up till trial, and somewhat after trial too, as far as restitution and things like that. But that's generally, I think, the biggest distinction.
The mediation, the victim does not have to agree to mediate. And so a lot of our victims may say, I don't want to do it. They are done, they've moved on, it's been a few months, they don't have any desire to meet with the offender. So mediation is totally voluntarily on the victim if they want to do it or not.
thank you.
Next is our community service juveniles.
Not a whole lot of change here. Our crew leader spends the majority of her time, New Ulm Street Department is our highest hours at 426. It was 476 last year. They spent a lot of time out at the Brown County landfill. They spent 205 hours there last year, 268 this year. The hours are down a bit. We had some more serious offenders. So in the middle there it says, so if you move up a little bit less, the average crew size this year was 2.98. It was 3.5 last year, but we have to, our crew leader also has to try to not to put our petty offenders working off with our sex offenders, try to keep the crews. She has to put all these kids together on the same crew. She's very proud of cleaning up the trash bags at the very bottom. We had, 2 years ago, we had 390 bags of trash picked up. Last year was 459, and this year is 649 bags.
She likes her garbage.
She likes, yeah. So there wasn't a huge change in this graph.
Moving on to the adult STS Wood. Again, they had about 700 more hours than the year previously. Again, not a lot of anything in specific that I saw. Basically the same project, same about percentage of hours.
There's a lot more females on the adult work crew. There was
More females.
42 females in
Yeah.
2017 and only 28 in 2016, so.
And then trying to keep right on time, which we're doing pretty well here. Here's our last page. This kind of helps Yvonne and I kind of guide the department with what our work activity in comparison to previous years and our reports that we submit to the court. The first one is our adult reports that we submit. These are sometimes 4, 5, 6, 7-page reports to the court on backgrounds on offenders. Same thing in the juvenile world. Our bail studies that we do for the court, the number of violation reports that we submit, number of alcohol and drug assessments, our apprehension detention orders. Number went down. We only had 3 for juveniles last year, so I'm sure the sheriff's department was pretty happy that we weren't transporting as many juveniles that were picked up on apprehension orders. Restructures are basically a violation report that we have the client say, you violated your probation by consuming alcohol or drugs. I agree not to go to court. I'll do community service. I'll get a new updated assessment. I will meet my probation officer twice a week, and I'll not have any further alcohol-related violations. They sign that, then they don't have to go back and see the judge, so it saves court time. Number of adult offenders, juvenile offenders. There's the teen court numbers on there to show you. We track our STS hours back for juvenile court hours. This is the only spot that you can see detention placement. So we had 19 kids placed in detention last year. So it went up, so it was going really down there just a few years ago. Now it's starting to creep upward again. So I think we hit bottom. So this year we're starting out with a few already, so I don't know if I see that number going down. Hopefully it will stabilize. And that's our report for 2017. Been stable but busy. Any questions?
Mr. Chair. Just as far as my day job working in law enforcement, I think we have a very good relationship with probation, and I just see that all of it works really well together. County Attorney's Office, probation, law enforcement. Sometimes we have individual concerns because of our profession, but again, I think as far as a community, we work together well, and that, I don't think that that's something that doesn't necessarily exist all over, because I know better than that. So we're fortunate to have that, and I believe that that's, a lot of it's connected with leadership, so I'd like to thank you for sustaining that and leading in that direction.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and I do hear that from other folks, that they're very appreciative that we have a fairly quick response time to violations, and people are not following probation. Like right now, I'm going right after this to the jail to meet with somebody who was picked up late last night, and I think because of you folks allowing us to provide good programming, and Tom's group and having his preventative programs, we all work really well together. We don't have a lot of these cliques that, well, you go to some counties and there's a lot of infighting going on, and things just don't get done that way. And we just don't have that here, so.
I've worked in other areas, and of course we all talk, and I know of other concerns that we've had in, or people have had in other areas, and we're very fortunate, so thank you.
I'll move to accept order file.
Second.
Take motion a second. Any other discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right, thank you.
I'll come back later.
But I'll just wait.
Okay, 18, number Tom.
Okay, you're up.
You're running right on time here.
Something different, Tom.
What was it, Prince?
Okay, are you surprised or something?
Too bad and cold.
Yeah.
Like everybody
Or
else.
shocked?
No ditches this morning.
We need to go faster.
Try lemon water and ginger.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Don't talk about water, Tom.
I don't need to. Okay. So first we got the administrative bills.
thought I was the last person with a typewriter. I see you got a typewriter ribbon on here, so there must be two of them out there.
We can keep one around.
So it's not a special order yet, then?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion a second on the bills. Any other discussion? Seeing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
All right, yep.
We're gonna talk about it right now.
Oh, good. Morning.
Hi, Ruth.
Ruth.
21.
So this request is to appoint Cindy Brickert, and she would be a full-time property maintenance specialist drainage assistant in the auditor treasurer's department, and that would be at the hourly rate of $17.9131. That's grade 10, step 1. And this would be effective tomorrow, February 21st, 2019. Cindy's currently in the department as the collections property maintenance specialist, and that position will remain vacant.
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion a second. Any other discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 24.
And this request is to appoint Sandra Jarvis as a full-time correctional officer, and that would be at the hourly rate of $19.3779, and that's grades 11, step 1. Effective hire date would be, of course, dependent on her results for pre-employment background checks. She's currently has a correctional officer position in another county, and so we're lucky to have her come help us out.
Move it.
Second. A motion a second. Any other discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 24B.
And this request is to appoint Brody Zolstorf as a full-time correctional officer at the hourly rate of $18.7120, which is grade 11 entry level, and that would be effective again. His hire date would be dependent on the results of pre-employment background checks.
I'll move it.
Second.
Motion is second. Any other discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you, Ruth. Okay, then we'll move on to 22, Mr. Manager.
Mr. Chairman, number 22 is the year-end budget report on a cash basis and unaudited. So at 100% of the year, expenditures were 96.2%, revenues were 100.7%. On the supplemental, expenditures were 96.9%, revenues of 99.1%. Would like to page through some of the attachments. We will have Human Services with some additional information next week on fund number 11. Page 1 and 2 are the revenue reports. You see the top certified levy was at 100%, and that includes collections from 2017 certified levy, but then also past collections that were due and were collected with interest. So there is some certified levy there from previous years that were unpaid. County program aid at 100%, para aid at 100%, mobile home property taxes listed separately. You see in revenue fund for state and federal aid at 118%, but you see the note that include that home buyout for $198,000. We are waiting for the final reimbursement, so there'll be another $45,000 or $50,000 coming. Expenses were all paid in 2017. We'll see an additional final payment of revenue this year in the cash activity. The road and bridge, we did list the bond, and premium revenue separately on page 2. And you see the federal soldiers rest reimbursement through the activity in the Veterans Office. Unless there's a question, I really didn't have any special notes on that page. On the top of page 2 on revenues, the second line is the License Bureau. We're at 98%. They did quite well. But there was about 8,000 or so projected uncollected funds because of MNLARS. We will have a sheet for you on some thoughts on MNLARS when we meet with the legislators at the EMC conference. So if we hadn't had that problem, we would have been right at 100% of the budget revenue in the License Bureau. On the third of the way down, Road and Bridge, special notes, $294,000 was collected in wheelage tax. That was at $10, so that budget is actually doubled then for 2018 on the estimated wheelage tax collections for the county road projects. Local option sales taxes was $1.6 million. Highway Committee is going to talk about that, and I know the county attorney will be involved as to the projection for the Highway 29 project and our transition process for that sales tax that was authorized by the board, and whether that is continued for future projects. So that will be a Highway Committee discussion first, starting today. Human Services is at 98%. Interest was at 99%. So you see at the very bottom of page 2, the total revenues were $37,016,553.07. The total expenditures were $34,041,354.92. But we will talk quite a bit on the next 2 pages about the Highway Department, because that's really where the underspending took place. Page 3 and 4 are the expenditures by department. The court administrator budget, the part that is the county expense, is $132,508 in 2017. We were over budget on attorney's fees that are court appointed. That is a county responsibility, and that all depends upon activity in a given year. Did have the special note in the middle of the page under building custodians. The 106% includes that large boiler room reconfiguration with the new controls. That was approved by the LEC Joint Powers Committee. The city paid 23.79% of that project. We did get reimbursement for a part of that. Utilities were not a problem last year on budget, although we're seeing January, end of December, January, and current expenses being over budget for 2018. And last year was a very good year that way. A couple of items noted in the contingency. There's a special note of that $10,130 on GIS remonumentation. That last payment was made in early 2017 using levy funds for the work that was finished in 2016. This was reduced by quite a few, several, 22, something like that, $1,000 by using LRF, the non-levy funds. So the ending amount that was levy funded was $10,130. You know, the board wanted to use non-levy funds as much as possible, so that is a revised number down from what you saw in the previous reports. Capital improvement, there's a couple items listed specifically. In public safety, jail, we're at 101%. The main item that was over budget was medical care of prisoners. We budget $40,000. Typically, we're at or under that amount for medical care. In 2017, we're at $87,000.
That's the highest it's been.
That's the highest it's been that I can remember. We just had 1 or 2 or 3 inmates that had special medication requirements, and when they're in the county's custody, the county's responsible for that payment. There you see also at the bottom, the hazard mitigation home buyout. There was 250,000. We had 198,000 of revenue, so that's where that 50,000 is still pending receipt from the state and federal government. We have some notes on page 4 for culture and recreation. Public health was at 96%. Road and bridge was actually at 81%. We did budget the 1.4 million as a placeholder for 2019, and of course that was not spent. Wayne also noted that our bids for that 28 miles or so of road resurfacing were favorable compared to budget, and there was some underrun. So Road and Bridge fund came out really well in 2017. Those funds stay there for future road projects when it's underspent or underrun. And just for a note, if you remove the Road and Bridge from the expense budget and you look at all the other departments, we're real close to that 100% of expenditure. And that's evident too when you look at the individual departments. But when you average them together, not factoring in the Road and Bridge, we're at about 100% on expenditure. Our revenue was 100.7%, so we're real close to a wash in 2017. The biggest benefit was the Highway Department fund. Human Services, the largest budget except for Road and Bridge, was at 100%, and we'll have further detail about Human Services next week. Mr. Chairman, page 5 would be the supplemental budgets that derive no income from the levy. You do have the balance noted from 2016, so you see the difference based on the 12-month activity in 2017. I would make one note on the landfill fund. The excavation expense that was accrued from last year's work on the new cell was not paid until 2018. So on a cash basis, the landfill fund actually went up by 125,000, but that was, the activity in January reduced that significantly. We'll actually, in the next report, show the balance that was at the end of 2016 and then the new balance at the end of 2017 for your information. On page 6 would be the chart compared to previous years. Overall, the revenue at 100.7% was really right on target. The expenses, 96.2% overall with the notes that you were provided. The last page, Mr. Chairman, page 7, would be the update of the Treasurer's cash report from the Auditor's Office. The audit officially at the top of the page is pending. Those numbers probably won't be available until July or so. But from a cash basis, you see the revenue fund, according to the auditor's records, went up from 4.4 to 4.6 million. Public health went up 100,000 almost. Road and Bridge significantly, and that's tied into the intended building of the account for the Road 29 project. Human Services was virtually unchanged. And then you have all other funds, which includes landfill, but that note, the numbers here do not reflect that excavation expense last year. So on a cash basis, we certainly have gone up somewhat. Some in the Highway Department, that's planned. The others really aren't changed a whole lot, except Public Health is a pretty significant increase. That would be part of the reason why the board discussed and is using some reserves for next year, this year I should say, in the Public Health. We were without a Public Health nurse position for a good part of the year. That's one of the reasons why we were underspent, and it shows up on the reserves building too. So this is on a cash basis, unaudited. If there's ever a question from any commissioner, please ask anytime.
Okay, any questions?
Move to accept and file.
I'll second it. A motion, a second. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. 23.
Mr. Chairman, this is the January budget report at 8.3% of the year, expenditures at 6.5, revenues at 6.6. You have some notes on the first page about January expenditure levels. There is a special note about road and bridge on revenue. That has a big effect on the overall budget summary because the state aid regular maintenance funds were actually received in January this year, $983,000 in maintenance and $419,000 in town road allotment. Most of the time that comes in the first month of February, so it wouldn't show up on this report, but that has an effect on the overall report. And there's also the note about the landfill fund activity in January. $289,000 was related to the new cell excavation work that was completed last year. So in the regular format, you have the January activity in page 1 and 2, and 3 would be by fund. And on page 4 are the supplemental budgets. Just to make that special note, Mr. Chair, on page 4, on the left margin, you see the balance from at the end of 2016, and then the balance as of the end of 2017 for your reference. The law library fund, for example, we were down to $3,255, and we did have some conversations with the court administration office in 2015 and 2016 when that was really dwindling. They have modified the expenses that the county is paying towards law library, software, and so on. So we actually did build about a $6,000 reserve during the year of 2017. Takes us out of the danger zone of having to use levy money for the law library. County attorney's forfeitures is basically the forfeiture funds were used for special projects, so it remains about the same. The contingent is the place where the sheriff has supplemented the multi-county drug task force funding. And I think it was just $3,000 that was available for this year's budget, but that's one we always review with the sheriff in August as to what's available to use non-levy funds toward that expense. Jail commissions went down significantly from $71,000 to $40,000 in reserves. The main expense was that using some of the non-levy funds for fixing the pipes, the corroded cast iron pipes for the 3rd and 4th floor plumbing in the LEC. That is not completed. Actually, the sheriff is going to bring in a project probably next week to use most of that $40,000 in reserve towards doing a couple cells that are modified for safety and for cleanup when we have unique individuals incarcerated that want to hurt themselves, etc. I know the commissioners have been updated on that, but that will probably use that, which means future plumbing costs end up being a contingency expense. Emergency telephone is as noted. The septic loan, as of 2017, there's $134,000. That's available for new loans coming up in spring, and that's part of that 400,000 that the county board has authorized of levy funds for that revolving loan fund. Building fund went down, and that's because of the state grant monies that were used for the road project. The landfill fund is, we've talked about, and then the score is actually up to 145,000 reserve in that account. Unless there's a question, Mr. Chair, that would be the January report.
Okay. Any questions?
Move to accept and order file.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion second. Any other questions? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay. Now, move on to C1 is the minutes. January 23rd. C2 is a letter from Bowser extending our water plan. C3, NACO.
Just a thank you.
Membership.
Yep.
C4, Southern Minnesota Tourism Association letter. Thanking us for funding. C5, probation department training. In Houston, Texas. Is there a couple? Or is it two? Ongoing?
I think that was less
Just less.
only.
And C6, PFC. Events coming up. Legislative conference, leadership summit. C7, update from AMC.
Commissioner Bingham, I think, was running for AMC, second vice president. She didn't win that election, but she's now won the Senate seat, so.
Yep. Go to commission reports.
Okay, Mr. Chair, Minnesota Housing Partnership, I attended on February 13th and 14th in Wilmer. And just to point out, when we had initially discussed that, when I had gotten appointed, pretty much all the expenses are paid through Minnesota Housing, except we found out mileage isn't included. So I just want to point that out to everybody's attention, but otherwise, hotels, registration fees, meals is taken care of through that grant. Far as it was a very good conference. I was really impressed. Learned a lot. Talking about some of the housing needs, and this group is made up of individuals from all over the state. We're partnered with Sibley County, just because we're smaller. So as far as our team, it includes Sibley County. And as far as the housing needs, we discussed it. Are we losing potential jobs and even economic opportunities because of the shortage? City of New Ulm did a housing study in 2017, and we discussed that, so we're a little bit ahead of the ball on that. A lot of the teams hadn't had one, and of course it's important to have that data as far as deciding or discussing where your needs should be focused. We talked about some of the, as far as sustainability with our population and maybe even hopefully building population. we looked at, which area do we want to focus on, and we haven't done that yet. That's going to be further discussion, but do we want to look into senior housing, because we understand we have a shortage with that, with an aging population that our county has. Also the homelessness, the low-income housing, we know we have a shortage there. I've been really surprised at how much homelessness we actually have in New Ulm. It looks a little bit different in New Ulm and Brown County than it does in the cities, but we have it. And I'm on with the police hat that I wear, I'm on a housing or a homelessness coalition board, and I've been really surprised how many homeless people we have like in our school system. And again, that it looks a little different. They're not necessarily living underneath a bridge, but we have a little bit of that going on. In fact, in law enforcement, we've been checking. There was some individuals living in a tent. It was pretty cold already, and they were still living in a tent. There wasn't kids, but it was 2 adults. But still, it just makes you, look that there may be something going on there that we need to address. And then we're also looking at, as far as the market rate housing, we're low on that as well. And again, overall, how does that affect as far as promoting growth and minimum sustainability of the population, which can be significant with the property tax levy. As far as that Minnesota housing study, the one that was done for New Ulm, it's actually on the city's website. But just some interesting points, and as far as time, I'm going to really summarize here. But we have 9,000 people working in the city of New Ulm every day. Out of that, 2/3 of them drive in. So approximately 6,000 people actually drive in. And they've done surveys, and they've asked them as far as a response. And 30% responded to the survey. And they said that they would like to own a home in New Ulm, but they just didn't feel there's anything that meets their needs. A lot of times it was because of cost and other factors involved, but they had said they would like to live in New Ulm. There's some scenarios where the people, if you're driving in from Mankato and one spouse works in Mankato, one works in New Ulm, well, they have to pick something. But that was kind of interesting, and again, that survey, I have a copy of it. I'm happy to let you look at it or make a copy for you. Otherwise, it's on the city's website. And again, just to summarize here, we picked a name for ourselves. It's called Minnesota Healthy Heartland Housing. So Minnesota Triple H. And then one thing that we had talked about that I thought was noteworthy is when we're working with Sibley County's a little different than us, a little smaller than us, but they have some serious needs. They're actually having a medical school that's potentially going to be it's going to be in Gaylord. It's not 100%, but it looks really good. But they're actually having a medical school, and that would involve 300 students. And then, of course, you need quite a bit of staff housing because you have the school there, and then it's also because they're medical students, they're older students. They have approximately 100 spouses that they need to support with housing, and even some of that, I think from a regional standpoint, it might help New Ulm as well. The next meeting that we're having, so we have these seminars, and that's always going to be in Wilmer. And we're going to be doing that. I think there's approximately 4 of them in 18 months. But we're going to have monthly meetings. The next one we're having is on March 26th at 3 p.m. at Winthrop City Hall. Open meeting, everybody's invited. What we're looking at is developing like a local commercial. We're going to have Herman on there, and then we're working with NewCat as far as having something professionally done. And then what we'd like to do is, so the next meeting, again, everybody's invited, that March 26th, but April 23rd is where we'd really like to, March 26th, we're going to really try to get our ducks in a row. And then on April 23rd, we'd really like to bring other members and decision makers to be part of that meeting and kind of present what we have as far as community partners. And that's about all I have for the report, other than our our local EDA, has done very well. They're very financially stable. You know, they kind of have good problems to work on. You know, they bring in an income of approximately $1 million a year in rental. But, you know, they're even looking at, you know, do we sell? Because if our mission is as far as housing, you would still have those apartments, and that would have approximately $12 million that you could work on other programs. But again, that's something that, you know, they're discussing, and they have little different viewpoints on that. But again, it's kind of a nice problem to have. You know, they're certainly financially stable. They've done a very, very good job. That would conclude my report unless there's questions.
Question on, so we've got a pretty good handle on the wall. What about other, you know, Sleepy Eye, Springfield, will there be study done there as well, or how will that?
Well, through their local EDA, you know, we could have one we don't have one at the county level. We could have one at the county level, and I think that might be something we'd want to, you know, I'm in the learning mode, but that might be something we'd want to do, that we could parallel, because, you know, Noam's Brown County, but again, their EDA is just, it's city level, so it's just focused on the city. I think that would be worthwhile for us to look into that direction, and we certainly have the support from them. You know, they like to work with us. But as far as those numbers, to answer your question on that, Commissioner Winchell, that study's just Noam. Then I also had a CHIP meeting that I attended on February 15th in St. Peter. And just to keep track on time here, they, one of the people that reported to us was Jen Maurer from the Noel Medical Center. She did an excellent job. She's talking about the Bounce Back project, and I believe that Public Health Director Karen Moritz has done some reports on that, and I think we're going to be hearing more about it. But from a county standpoint, just from a community standpoint, they're looking at 3 positive things that you can do daily. They know that this is evidence linked. It's not just like a feel-good project, but they know that you can have some significant gains with mental health benefits with doing relatively simple things, focusing on 3 positive things daily. Again, that's evidence-based. They know that there's a connection. It's, you know, positive results, inexpensive method to improve mental health. And then they get into like random acts of kindness and showing appreciation and gratitude, and how that, you know, not only benefits the community, but it actually benefits your own mental health, and as far as combating depression. And we're going to hear quite a bit more about that. As far as Jefferson Elementary School, they received some special compliments at that meeting, especially for Beth Sletta. They have a gardening project that they have, and you know, teaches the students as far as, you know, positive ways as far as growing food. And then they have their greenhouse. And they're functioning off of some funds from Noam Foundation, but the food is actually used with their lunch program. So I mean, it's kind of like, I think when we think of like common sense approaches, that's a pretty good common sense approach, and it's teaching the students of, you know, ways to maybe good life living styles. That would conclude my report, unless there's questions. It was a rather long meeting, but those were the highlights. Questions on that? Otherwise, that would conclude that report and all my reports.
Right. The only one I've got is a salary advisory committee, and we reviewed the survey findings, and subcommittees are going to address those and report back meetings today. And they're looking at those where we were 10% under. They're also going to look at those where we were 10% over, just to get an idea why, not that they're going to take any action on it. And if you have anything else to add?
Well, obviously, we have the most steps of any county, so
Yeah.
I think we'll look at that and see what can be done to address that. And the health insurance, I guess, looked at different things there, and I don't know that there's anything that really stuck out. I think we'll continue to evaluate that, so.
And that's all I've got.
Okay, I've got the meeting of the Rinky Noonan Ditch and Drainage Water Conference with Commissioner Simonson. And I'll touch on a few things there, and you can chime in whenever you want, I guess. But I'm gonna kind of bounce around here, but I made notes as we went through the chapters and stuff that maybe I had question on, or maybe that we've had question on as a board. And we talked about, one of the things we talked about was the interest rate being charged. And it started out, it said if you borrow money, you have to pay 7%. And Commissioner Simmons and I both looked at each other like, whoa, where'd that come from? But he did do some further research into it and determined that if we borrow money for repairs or improvements from other sources, such as reserves or other ditch system, we can pick and choose our interest rate there. Say it's 4%, that's fine. But if we borrow money that we bonded for, let's say there was a project and we bonded for that project and we ran short, and then we had to get additional funds, we have to by statute pay 7% on that money.
In other words, they don't want you doing that.
They don't want, yeah, they want you to make sure when you bond that you're bonding for a big enough amount. So, that was one item. Okay. They talked about and this is coming out of statute here, drainage systems must be inspected on a regular basis once every 5 years. If no violation of grass strip is a requirement, if a violation of the grass strip requirement is found, it's got to be inspected annually until 1 year after the violation has been corrected.
Question, inspected by whom?
Didn't say that in here.
By someone in the county.
By someone. The reason I'm asking that is because we are having, the county is, Nicole is supposed to, our ditch inspectors are, but also we run into the same thing with SWCD is also somewhat responsible. And it doesn't make sense for us to be having both organizations or board groups of people doing some kind of inspection. I mean, we should coordinate that if that's what we have to do. That's why I was asking if they place some a name or a responsible party in your statute.
We should talk to them.
There is a spot in here, and we'll come across this. Let me just go a little further here. We talked about repair limits. Repairs are necessary in the best interest of the property owner. You know, normally we say, okay, you got to have 20% benefits or $100,000 maximum. But there's a catch-all free thing in there that says that if they're necessary and in the best interest of the property owners, there is no limit. You really could go to whatever limit you'd have to do. Yeah, if you have a repair by petition, if the repair petition is signed by 26% of the property owners affected and assessed for the original construction of the damaged drainage system, then the drainage authority must order the repair.
What was the percentage of people?
26%. If you want to do an abandonment, a petition must be signed by at least 51% of the property owners. Got loan business, we talked about that. It was an excellent conference here overall, and like I said, I'm just trying to hit some of the things that I know we've discussed in the past. You know, the 16.5 feet for maintenance, if we go in there, we really can go past the 16.5 feet, but of course we're going to be responsible for any repair, crop damage and all of those kinds of issues. But our having our easement certainly helps us clarify that and not have issues there. Again, the inspection maintenance requirement under 103E 705 says that drainage ditches shall be inspected at a minimum every 5 years. They did, and the drainage authority must control weeds. And,
Does it specify, because it's another question that's come, because whether we're responsible for the buffer or just the ditch as drainage authority?
I believe the buffer and the ditch would be included together.
That's three to two.
Yeah.
I'm just, that's been a question that's been being asked.
Okay, so he talked about the differences of enforcement comparison here between 103E and 103F. And there's no property lien, let me see here. There's no property lien in law that says that the enforcement authority, the enforcement authority currently, the way the law is written, would need to go to court to get a judgment and then have it enforced. There's no current penalty that is enforceable with the law the way it is written according to.
The Dayton buffer, right?
This is the Dayton buffer, yeah. Nothing in the law says we have the authority to go in and replant the buffer currently. Now, those are all glitches that they think they will address and get squared away and straightened out. But currently, that's what the thing is written. If you do alternative measures, you don't have to have a buffer, right? You can do some alternative stuff. If you did alternative practices, they should be paid for by the landowner, and if not kept up, so if they all of a sudden say, okay, we're gonna do this buffering around the tile intakes or whatever, but they don't keep it up, then you can go back in, and drainage authority go in, put buffers on the ditch, make the landowner pay for it. The law says that we shall inspect, but where do you get authority to enter the land? For the SWCD, it currently is not written into the law. So, although they're probably supposed to do that, it's not how the law is actually. So there's lots of little nuances here that are still in trouble. Buffers take up about 4 acres per mile. And we figured that was on both sides of the ditch, so you got a mile of buffer, you got 4 acres of land out of production. We talked about using land values if you're doing now, but the redetermination didn't happen until 2025. They suggested that you use the value at 2025 on what the land condition was in 2018 when the buffer went on. So that was kind of how they determined or think that should go down. 103E says that the drainage authority can set the vegetation mix to whatever they determine they want. So that's when we had that question come up the other day. We actually, we could set that, or we can set that. Then there was a section, that was on the drainage buffer laws. Then there was a section on phosphorus and where it's coming from and why it's a increasing problem since 1940, even though they've thrown millions of dollars at it. And basically, they said 1/3 of the phosphorus is left in the soil that doesn't get used up. And we talked about how in the past, and this was my thought process, was always that if there was more sloughs, we'd have better, cleaner water. But this gentleman here was from Wink Associates, WNCK, and he is stating that in the studies they did in Edina, was it? Or it was in the metro area. In these ponds that were there, the actual ponds are creating phosphorus, and that phosphorus particulates enter the water and turn into gaseous forms.
Soluble, turns into soluble phosphorus. It comes into the wetland, and then by not having oxygen, it'll go to the bottom, and then over a period of time, and it can be very immediate within weeks. If it's non-oxygenated, then it turns to a soluble form and then gets re-released. So they're seeing almost equal amounts leaving. It's a different type of phosphorus, but it's leaving, almost in equal amounts.
it's feeding itself is what it amounts to, kind of. And then they talked about, you know, carp, and the problem with carp in there, in that the carp's digestive system actually increases phosphorus as well. And so there was a lot of information there as well. You can use aluminum sulfate to get rid of phosphorus, but what it does is it permanently binds the phosphorus to the sediments and holds them down, but that's expensive. $3,300 an acre for lake land, so, you know, I don't know how big Lake Hanska is, but...
And what's gonna happen with that?
Well,
process in 20
exactly,
years?
exactly, and
Yeah,
now
what
it's all
process is
hanging
that?
on the bottom of that lake or pond, and
I think we're jumping into a lot of these things that without any kind of realistic knowledge of what's going to happen long-term to fix.
yeah. So, that was everything I kinda had, but, you know, in the back of my head, and I have no idea where I can even check this, but, you know, zebra mussels, they clean the water out, right? What if you could control the zebra mussels and make sure they didn't get away and put them in containers, and maybe they'd clean the lake out?
Actually, what you need to do is find some delicacy that zebra mussels are, that you can
Yeah.
stock the lakes with them and stain them out and have a...
Excellent course, would definitely recommend, and if anybody wants to look at this book or read this book, then it's more than welcome to do so. Definitely worthwhile.
Just a couple things that if we have a ditch system that we don't have records on, which I don't know if we have any, or, you know, at least the established, the grade and the depth and things like that, we can hire engineers to get that paperwork, or, you know, redetermine what that original grade was or whatever of that ditch. So that can happen. Obviously, it would be expensive, but there is a process to do that if we need to do that. They looked at inspection records for joint ditches that we own with other counties, and just who's responsible for what. So they covered a little bit of that. And then one other thing that they talked about, which I'm not sure where they were going with this, but they talked about, you know, for the Dayton law, you've got alternative practices that you can do. You'd have an 8 to 5 foot buffer, that's a minimum if you have alternative practices. What they hinted at is that the county, you could, it's not in law, and I don't know where they get this from, but they hinted that the county may be able to extend that if you do a redetermination. And
So my understanding is that the first buffer law required, or the first redetermination part would be required when you do a redetermination 16.5. That supersedes the buffer, the Dayton buffer. So what I've been understanding is if you go in and do any alternatives, when you go through the redetermination, you gotta go to the 16.5 foot buffer. There's no options on that.
well, they say that, man.
Yeah, it's only gonna get settled in court if somebody
Right.
spends
They
some money
said,
to go to court.
you know, if Dayton law says that the alternative practice provides clean water, which is what they're saying the buffer does, why can't they swap? And they're hinting at this. I'm assuming that, like you said, it'll get settled, but there's a hint that we could do that. The question is, is that gonna be the counties? Are we gonna be going out there and determining what's alternative and what's not? So, I don't know. So anyway, it was probably more discussion anyway, but.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Winchell, did you want to report on that historical society?
That actually got canceled because of the weather last evening, but we maybe should just touch base on,
our committee meeting.
yeah, our committee meeting that we had.
Last Friday.
And we did meet with the Historical Society Commissioner, Administrator Enner and myself, and reviewed the masonry bids and going out for bid to take a look at that. It's got the engineer's report, I suppose is what that was called, and it shows, obviously, in that top section, there's some real bad stuff going on there. But tried to look at funding sources, and we were reviewing grant situations, doing it in phases instead of trying to do it all at one time, to try to bring the grant down to reasonable levels. The next move for the Historical Society is to make sure that that they want to go ahead with this and pursue this grant writing process, and to come up with some different ways that we could look at it from the board's perspective, then to say, you know, how do we want to pursue repair to this building that we own? And I don't know if there was other.
And the follow-up to that is, at the next board meeting, the board will be asked to approve the authorization to advertise for the bids for the project. And we would have to place the advertisement that the architect prepared in the Hansca paper as a legal paper and in the journal. And then the architect would send it out to various restoration companies. And we have that as a county cost to advertise. But the architect has noted, as Commissioner Winchester has stated, there's 4 different possible phases. And the goal, hopefully, would be to do phase 1 and 2, which you'll have a description of. But the architect's estimate is that could be close to a $400,000 cost. And that much would not be normally funded by the grant
Would not be.
legacy. So in our discussion as a committee, the thought was we may need to match, instead of 15,000 like we've done in the past, match closer to 30%. And how we could get to that point, because on a $400,000 project, that's 120,000. How much could the Historical Society match of that? How much would the county have to match? Is there a benefactor out there that would help us with that match? Those are the things that we talked about. But in order to get, if it's a $400,000 project, if we have to put in somehow 120,000 to get 280,000, that will be the question probably in a month or so, after these bids are received and we find out the exact cost based on a restoration company's bid. So this architect work was prepared based on the board action last November, so we pay 50% to do the architect work to set it up. So we will ask the board next week to authorize getting bids, and we'll have that summary information attached so that you've got the total picture.
And just off, you know, like I said, so it is a lot of money, but it's a lot of money being in the project too. I mean, we're getting a lot of bang for our buck if we can get a grant to help us to do that. So we've got to keep that in mind. But yeah, that's last night's meeting got canceled. So.
We will have Catherine
Backer
here, and also Ann Earl here next week to talk about the architect's work. But the limitation will be just to get the advertisement going and see what the real numbers are. At this point, we just have an estimate from the architect.
Okay. That's all for you. That's concludes my reports. Okay. Move on to calendar. Today is
You're gonna have to get up and move again, because I can't load my calendar. I did put it to the phone, I think I'm gonna be okay.
All right, we're on the 20th is today.
Mr. Chair, I have Sioux Trails at 4 p.m. Corporate meeting.
Got a highway meeting, a salary meeting, and then Sioux Trails this evening.
Sioux Trails.
Sioux Trail at corporate board at 4 and the regular Sioux Trails meeting at 6.
Highway after that.
Okay.
Public health, the Best Western at 12:30 to 3:30.
Same thing.
Same, and I got men back from 6:30.
I am unable to make that. I've got to come in.
Health meeting with all.
Okay, the 22nd.
I have a MRCI meeting, local meeting at MLC at 11:30.
Open.
This is 22nd, 8:15, community health exec, 2 wellness meeting, and 4 that's meeting in Cortland, if I can make it. Community center.
That's Highway 14.
Highway 14, 15, yeah.
I will not be able to make that community health meeting. I've got another company meeting that day also.
So you won't be at the wellness also.
I don't know if that's that day, yeah. What time's that? 3?
2 o'clock.
I'm open.
Commissioner Berg, do you have a Region 9 legislative session?
Oh, I can't
at
make
5?
that.
You do,
I
right?
cannot make that, I let them know.
Oh, okay, then we'll take it off here.
Okay, 23rd.
Open.
Open.
I've got ditch meetings in the morning. And, there is also a shack meeting, and I have called Denny Camp on that one.
So you'll be going to the ditch meetings?
Yes.
So that's all of these that we got in the packet from here. Okay.
That's all on your.
It's mostly in line.
Is there a start then?
Are you
It-
doing all 3?
One of them extends into Stark.
Yeah, or you can handle that. Okay. Is there a Franklin Bridge meeting that?
We do have a Franklin Bridge meeting with Commissioner Simonson and Potter at 9 a.m. at the Fairfax City Hall. I'm assuming you'll be driving direct,
Yeah.
Same,
so it's at Fairfax.
in the city hall. Where's the city hall? I should be able to find it, I would think.
I think it's right on the main street, you know, Fairfax. Got double main street there, though.
Yeah. I'll find
Main,
it.
main drag, it might be off a block on the west side.
Yeah.
I'll
I
get
got
it-
mapping of it.
If,
We'll get an address to you,
yeah.
Well, otherwise I got mapping, I can find it too.
but it's at 9 a.m.
I'll find it. We're gonna be a couple hours, you think?
at the most.
Okay, that's the 23rd, 26th.
I have a joint powers workforce meeting at 4 p.m. in Mankato.
Open.
26. I get community health full board, but I'm the only person who's got that written in, don't I?
Yep.
Must be wrong.
It's gonna be a lonely meeting. Quick meeting though.
Let us know what you're talking about.
Yeah. I must be open.
I'm open.
Open.
Okay, 27th.
Commissioners,
Yeah, same.
Commissioner meeting, then I would imagine we'd leave for AMC.
The AMC starts at 9. So we will plan on driving early on Wednesday morning. We have one night reserved.
Okay, good.
I've got like 8 AM, what do we got?
The 2 department reviews,
Reviews at 8.
Commissioner Borker, do you have that also, correct?
I wrote that on the wrong date.
Okay, so that's
It's on the
27th.
27th. Okay, yep, I got it here.
We'll have HR at 8 and the assessor at 8:20.
Okay, then I got commission meeting and then drainage committee, is that, do we have that?
What I got?
That's what I had noted here too, haven't seen the agenda yet.
That's what I got.
Same thing, county and drainage.
Okay, the 28th.
AMC conference.
Yeah.
And how are we gonna ride or bring that?
We can coordinate that at the next meeting on Tuesday, if that's okay.
That's what I got.
What time will we leave roughly? Do we have any idea there? So I can mark that in.
Certainly no later than 7. But we'll finalize that Tuesday.
Okay, let's get that.
AMC.
Move to March 1st.
AMC, second date.
Yep.
Same.
Same,
Same.
the 2nd,
Open.
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 I've got area 2 RCRCA.
Okay, the 5th,
Open.
Open.
Enterprise North at 3:45 and a park meeting at 7 here.
open,
Open.
and the 6th moves us 2 weeks out. Okay, if there's no other business, meeting is adjourned.
Yeah,